Hey guys, Lisa here, and this is chapter 7 of the story of me. Welcome back. Yeah, I didn't expect it to go so long between chapters, but sometimes life just happens. Um, and this, every chapter I think is like the hardest chapter, and then I got to do the next one, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to say to this? And so that's kind of where I've been with this. And I had some health challenges also that I needed to heal from, and so I'm doing much better, and so able to pop in and yeah, moving right along. And so up until now, just a brief little recap. So if you haven't been following along to the previous 6 chapters, feel free to go back and take a listen. But here's just a kind of a quick synopsis of my life up till this point. I was born a preemie, and my mom wasn't able to take care of me. I was adopted by my adoptive grandparents, who had adopted my mom and sisters and brother when they were little, because they were left along the side of a freeway by their mom. And so they had their own story. And this one's mine. I don't want to tell theirs. It's not fair, but that's just part of where we are. And so my adoptive grandparents, who had adopted them, adopted me. And so I grew up knowing them as mom and dad. And my grandmother passed away when I was 6 and a half, and I found her dead. And my grandfather, I stayed with him until I was about 12 years old, and endured several types of abuse, just inappropriateness growing up. Hold on just a second. My dog needs out. Hi, I'm back. Sorry about that. So growing up after my grandma passed away, it was just me and my dad, my grandpa. And for the next 6 years, I was the woman of the house, and was sexually abused. And after that, I was taken away at 12 and put into a foster home. My dad, grandpa, he decided to take his own life at the consequences he was facing for what he had done. And from there, it was an interesting stay in foster homes. And like I'm sure most are, unfortunately, that probably wasn't a fair statement. I feel like I should apologize, because I don't know. I know what my experience is. And so I had some interesting times. And from the foster home, I ended up going back to the house I was raised in, who is now occupied by my aunt and uncle and their children, so my cousins. And so my aunt and uncle had their own drug problems, and I was now the oldest in the house, and that was interesting in its own right. And growing up an only child, I now had siblings, insta-siblings. And so that was, quite a learning curve there. And so we didn't always get along. And but I feel like we were fairly close, at least at that time in life. And so I was there for a couple years, and the abuse and their drug abuse really was weighing on me and creating its own challenges. And so the day after I turned 15, I left home. And so I ran away, and I've been on my own ever since, well, if you want to call it that. But I left home the day after I turned 15 and spent some time with friends for a little bit, and then ended up in a situation where I was a victim of human trafficking. And so that was my life for a few years in my teenage years, and I was finally able to break away from that, thank goodness, and met my first husband. And although I was no longer a victim of human trafficking, I was now a survivor of human trafficking. My first marriage was not always a good one. We had a lot of good times, and I got to do a lot of good stuff and a lot of fun stuff and a lot of growing, I suppose. But there was a lot of abuse, a lot of physical abuse, verbal, emotional, and compounded with the prior traumas that I had not worked on yet. It just was a recipe for disaster. At the end of that marriage, I tried to take my life for the first time, and thank goodness I was not successful. Well, I think I was pretty successful. God just said he wasn't done with me yet. I woke up on a ventilator and spent 3 days in ICU, and then, the mandatory hold and stuff. And, yeah, that really changed the course of my life at that point. And so I jumped from the frying pan into the fire and met my next ex-husband not long after the first ex-husband. And so, yeah, I guess I needed a lesson in rebound relationships. I don't know. I'm being cute here. And that was another 10 years of growing and abuse and all sorts of stuff. Both good and bad. I have not just 2 beautiful girls that I birthed myself, but I have 3 bonus daughters that were my second husband's from his first marriage, and I'm so blessed to get to have them in my life. And I've got my other 2 daughters, and there were a lot of good things that came out of it, but there was a lot of bad too. And so that was the last chapter, was an overview of that period of my life, which brings us up to now. Well, not now, but like, oh gosh, what is it, like 8-10 years ago? At the end of the second marriage. And so that brings us up to this chapter. I couldn't do it anymore. A little over 10 years I was with him, and yeah, I learned a lot. I come on these chapters and I don't sit down and prepare because I feel like whatever needs to be said and heard is what's going to come out. And my life wasn't scripted, and so these chapters aren't either. I guess I'll start with his last relapse. We had just bought a house, and I only had it a few months. I finally thought that things were going to get stable, and we were going to just be this happy little family, and everything was going to work out, and it was all just going to be sunshine and rainbows. Yeah, well, then the storm clouds came. And it was December 31st, I guess, 2015, I believe. And I get my years and my times mixed up. I have segments of time in my life that are either blurred or I don't remember a lot. And sometimes the memories come back and sometimes they don't. And maybe they will in time. I don't know. But sometimes I get my timing mixed up because of that. And so, he relapsed. It was New Year's Eve. We had old friends at the house, and we were doing karaoke. The kids were having fun. We were all having fun, and it was a good night, and he disappeared. And I don't remember how long he was gone. I don't remember how it all played out. I do remember that he went and got loaded. And I was absolutely mortified and terrified. I knew the pattern. I knew what was coming after that, and I just couldn't go through another one. I say that, but I stayed longer than I should have, and I ended up relapsing with him, which was god awful. And I watched my entire life in a matter of months, just everything I'd worked for just slipped through my fingers. It was absolutely nightmarish that last few months. I know it was nightmarish for me. I can only imagine what my girls remember. I tried really hard to shield them from him and from what was going on, and he didn't make that easy. And so I finally left and took the girls, and I went back a couple times hoping he was going to pull his head out of his butt, because how was I going to raise these 2 children on my own? I have no support system. And hindsight, come to find out the support system I thought I had, it wasn't. And so I was scared. I was not confident. I felt incapable. All the self-limiting beliefs. And I had gotten clean and was going to take care. I was going to do the single mom thing, And at first, I went to his mom's because I thought that was the right choice to make, and it didn't work out there. I wasn't there long. The girls and I weren't there long, and she made it perfectly clear the only reason I was there is so her children or her grandchildren wouldn't be in a shelter. I wanted to take the girls to a shelter because I knew it would be a good transition to get us on our feet. And so I should have followed my instincts. God, hindsight's always 20/20, right? And so there was still a lot of instability. Things that I couldn't control. I was trying to get a job. I was not in a good headspace. I was trying to be. I really was trying to be. But I didn't know how to be. And so we moved around several times. I didn't want to do that, but that's how it went. And we ended up moving a couple hours away out into the country with a family that opened their home to us. And that was an interesting situation. And, you know, this chapter of my life, I had to laugh because a good portion of the other chapters, I suffered at the hands of others. This chapter, these are my hands. This was my doing, my undoing, my learning curve, growth. Things happen for a reason, right? We're not supposed to question that, and I know that everything truly does happen for our highest best good, and it is growing us and for our evolution and our betterment. But I tell you, there's a lot of things in this particular chapter that God, I wish I would have done differently. Hindsight. So this was the first time Lisa had ever truly been on her own. I wasn't under someone's thumb, and I was reeling from years of having been under someone's thumb. I wanted to find out who I was, find my individuality, my own lane, I suppose. And eventually, I guess I did. You know, like I said, everything does happen the way it's supposed to. And I can do a lot of things. I don't like that word. To look back with regret or anger or any of those other things, I guess just shows where I still need to do some work. Because I wouldn't be who I am without all of this stuff. So, there's a lot of stuff I've hacked into a few years, and it really changed me. I thought my years with the second ex-husband changed me. I'd say this next section of my life was even more so. And so we moved a couple hours away out into the country, colder climate, and I really didn't know these people. I was still trying to find that stability, still trying to find that family, I suppose, to find out where I fit in and where I belonged. I didn't feel like I fit in or belonged anywhere. I didn't understand the concept of go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. I didn't understand the concept of not seeking that external validation or trying to be something that you think others want you to be. I struggled with that for so many years, and not to say I don't now. It's just not like it was then. And so we moved out there, and I was drinking. I wasn't using drugs anymore, but I was drinking. That was too much. Alcohol and I do not get along. I thought we got along really well. And I learned that I was a blackout drunk. And it wasn't very nice. And that hurts my soul. Because the last thing sober Lisa ever wants to do is hurt anybody. That's like the exact opposite of who I am. And I guess at that point, I just didn't know who I was. But beyond that, I had a lot of wounds, a lot of open wounds, a lot of trauma, recent trauma, a lot of pain. And so when I would drink, the pain would come out. And I wasn't very nice to those around me, and that is one thing I am sorry for. And I do apologize, and I'll apologize for as long as I'm able to. But you can't take back words. And that was part of my growth in this period of life. And so I was drinking a lot and not making good choices and just trying to find myself and kind of wilding. I had been in relationships up until this point, and goodness, how old was I when I left him? I'm thinking, I think 36. And so I was late 30s. Yeah. So not making the best choices. And I think just trying to reclaim part of things I felt I had missed out on in life, and just searching for myself, I suppose. And so this family I was living with, it was good because they had kids my girls' age, and they all got along, and we all cooked together and cleaned, did the whole family thing. We weren't the Brady Bunch, but I hope you get the connotation. And so I ended up, I couldn't find work. I couldn't find work. And I had left a job to move out here. I had gotten a job where I was, and then we moved. And I was just all over the map trying to find something, anything. I don't even know what I was looking for, to be honest. Excuse me. We were out there for several months. I don't even know how long. And it was cold. It was really cold. And I grew up in Texas, mind you. And so cold climate really wasn't my thing. And I was like, you people are insane. How can you deal with this all the time? And I laugh at that now because where I live now is a similar cold climate. But yeah, that's another chapter. Live and learn. Still not real fond of the cold. But you know what? There's no mosquitoes or flies in the cold, so it does have its benefits. And it can be nice and snuggly, too. But back to the chapter. And so we stayed out there until I just decided that as soon as things thawed, we were moving. I couldn't do it anymore. I needed something else, anything else. I don't know. I couldn't live there. I needed to get away from there. And so, looking back, having said that, recognizing the pattern, I guess I had been running my whole life. And so a good part of this particular chapter, I was still running. And I wasn't trying to, but I was. I guess I was running from me, running from the pain, running from the memories. That's what it was. And so the drinking was a way to not feel, or to feel differently. And I continued to drink through this period in my life, and I'm glad to know it's not for me now. So we ended up moving back to where we had come from, or at least the area. And I was dating this guy. I had already had a couple. No, wait, maybe just one. There was a lot of self-judgment that just went through my brain right there. So I was dating this guy, and he was not. I should not have ever. Life lesson. They talk about soul contracts, that we make contracts with people before we come here, and they're lessons that we're supposed to learn in this life, and they teach us things that we wouldn't have learned any other way. Yeah, well, I think this one may have been worse than the ex-husband, and that's saying a lot. So, dating this guy, and at first it was all great, and until it wasn't, and he was supposed to be clean. He had lied, and I found out, and I ended up relapsing, and I couldn't blame anybody else at this point for the drugs or my addictions or anything. And I was working, mind you. If there's something called a functioning drug addict, alcoholic, that's what I was at that point. And so I was working. I was actually the only one working, so I'm supporting the house. I have now a drug habit. I have my 2 daughters, and I'm trying to balance all of this stuff and a very narcissistic, abusive boyfriend. And I think I saw him on and off for a couple years. 2.5, I want to say. We lived with him. It was horrible. Hi. Izzy says hi. Yeah. Say, Mom, what is that stuff on your face? I don't wear makeup much these days, so I just felt like it today. And so I put not only myself through the ringer with this guy, but I put my children through it too. I drugged them through it. And the fights were horrible. The addiction was horrible. The control was horrible. The mind games were probably the worst, though. Just not cool. I can't even give you specifics, just a blur of nightmarish scenarios. And for any of you that have gone through those kinds of relationships, I'm sure you have a pretty good idea of what it is that I'm referring to, at least in your own experiences. So it was awful. I'd leave him, we'd go back. It affected every single area of my life. I went downhill. I was spiraling. I was finally able to get away from him. And about the time I was getting away from him, I'm needing a job. And there was a waitressing job, cocktail waitress job in the paper. And so online in the paper, wherever the heck I found it. And I knew at least one or two other people that had worked there. And they're like, you should come work. And, it seemed like the thing to do. And so Lisa became a cocktail waitress at a strip club. I don't know how else to say it in a tactful way. And that, I learned a lot. Oh my goodness, I learned a lot. I earned really good money, and so I was cocktail waitressing at first, and I was also hostess, store person, and little nice Lisa. They were pretty strict about who could come in. You had to have very, very up to par identification and everything else, and so I had to find my tough side. And I had bouncers, that if it got out of hand would back me up. But working there in that environment and through that time in my life and where I was seeking a lot of external validation, I suppose. And I started getting attention that I wasn't used to getting. And it changed me. I guess in some ways it was a good thing because I learned a lot of good things. It grew me a lot of ways, and I'm still really grateful for it. But at the same time, I was running purely, I think, on ego. And looking back with the knowledge of self-development and where I'm at in my life now, just trying to take an honest look at it, that was ego driving me. And so I became kind of superficial. The most I'd ever been in my life. And that's not who I am either. I've not ever been high maintenance. I've not ever really... It's not that I don't care how I look, but I just didn't invest all that time into it. And when I worked there, I did. It became a thing. I became a shopaholic. I did not even like shopping for myself. And I still struggle with shopping for myself. But, I had these... intrusive, impulsive thoughts, and I had no control over them. And the further it went, the less control I had, and I was a wild woman. And, not to say it didn't have its fun, it did, but I became very loud, very boisterous. Not that I'm not loud anyway, I've always been loud. But my mouth, my attitude, and the whole 9 yards just was over the top, to use other people's words here, but it was. I can look back and say it was over the top. And so I did my fair share of dating, especially working where I was. And so the manager at the bar I worked at asked if I would be willing to cross-train, and I was mortified because I knew boundaries, self-confidence, yeah, not me. She wanted to cross-train me to be a bartender. And so that is what I did. And I had always wanted to be a bartender. And the guys that were in my life at any given time the job came up, I was not allowed to go be a bartender. So I was going to be a bartender. And guess what? I found out why I was never allowed to be a bartender. It really is a lifestyle. And the lifestyle got to me, man. And yeah... I can say a lot of good, but it was everything you can think it was. And so I made it a point to look as cute as I could. Spent money and time on things that really, in hindsight, didn't matter. Sought the type of validation that wasn't needed. Um, did a lot of dating. Um, still a lot of blackout drinking. And I was in and out of my addiction at this point because I didn't want to continue on in that way. That's just, no. And I would get clean, and then ghosts from the past would call, and I would slip, get clean, slip, and of course, beer goggles. And so that was a big part of my problem. Had I not been drinking, I can't say I wouldn't have been weak to the other, but probably wouldn't have been as easy to get me to say yes. And unfortunately, my children were witness to all of this. And so I'm still trying to be the best mom I could possibly be. And I was working multiple jobs at this time because I was supporting us, supporting dead weight, spending money like I shouldn't have been. And then I developed the taste for gambling and machines. Really, goodness gracious. I look back and I'm like, really, Lisa? But, we have to go through things to grow through things, right? And these are things in my life that if I weren't doing these chapters, I probably wouldn't say anything. I still hold self-judgment for a lot of my behavior. But see, behavior is symptomatic of a heart condition. And just recently started a podcast with a friend of mine. And our last episode, that's what we were talking about, being your biggest cheerleader. And I still have a lot of self-judgment there, and I'm working on healing that. And those behaviors were symptomatic of my heart condition. And when I say heart condition, I'm not referring to a medical heart condition diagnosed by a medical practitioner. I'm referring to my trauma and the condition of my heart and my emotional well-being at that time in my life. I was grasping at straws, figuratively, literally. Bad joke, I know. I was doing the best I could with where I was at, and I allowed a lot of unnecessary stuff, and it kind of made me blind to other things, and that breaks my heart. I put my children's safety at risk, and that was the last thing I ever wanted to do. I had some good friends at the time that would help me, when I was at work, and so that way my children always had a safe, stable place with people they knew, they were comfortable around. I wasn't dragging them out, with me. Mom would go out for the night, though. And that's one of those things I will forever be sorry for. I wish I would have been home more. And I can't get those years back. I can't change that. I can't undo that. I'll never get that back. And they'll never get that back. And that's why that hurts me. Here come those tears. I made a lot of choices and behaved in a lot of ways that were less than great. I dated a lot of guys that today I would probably cross the street if they were walking toward me. Not knowing them, just as a stranger, but I'd probably cross the street just to not walk next to them. And so if that gives you an idea of where I was at that point in my life and my lack of self-esteem, fear of not being wanted or not being enough. Those were things that drove me at that point. And it didn't seem like I could ever work hard enough or be enough or do enough to be enough at that point. And I'd like to give that version of me a hug. Because she was always enough. And so, The years kind of flew by, and I didn't have a very big support system, but I had a couple different couples that would help me. Like I said, my best friend and her husband, and another couple that I thought were friends. He had ulterior motives, and this is one of those things I was blind to. And I don't even know how much I want to say about that because there's still a lot of confusion inside of me. There's still a lot of, I guess, things I'm working out. Sometimes you trust the wrong people. And I did. I guess I had a pattern of that. I had a history of that. I didn't have good character judgment. I see the good in everyone, but that doesn't mean that they see it in themselves or honor it in themselves or even care to be that. And so, ignoring red flags and seeing what I wanted to see or what I thought was there, and it wasn't. And I'm still kind of just flabbergasted at the whole thing. And so I ended up dating a guy. It was the last guy I dated, and then this whole myriad of whatever the hell that was. Me trying to find my way. Me trying to be strong enough and find my way and earn enough money and be all the things and not feel like I'm getting old and antiquated and so many other things that I was battling at that point in my life, let alone the fact that I had to get a restraining order from the second husband, the father of my children, because he would pop in, and that was a nightmare in and of itself. And I had a string of really bad relationships. All the wrong ones. But you know what? I guess some of us aren't going to recognize the right one until we know what the right one doesn't look like. And so that's where I'm going with that one. I wouldn't know what love was if I didn't know what it wasn't first. Story of my life. And so this last guy I dated, he was a customer that'd come into the bar, and he was really squared away, and I thought this one was different. And he was in some ways. And in a lot of ways, he wasn't. And we ended up moving in with him because I lost my place that I had for me and the girls. I was renting out one of the bedrooms to a friend of mine, and they stabbed me in the back and, talked to my landlord. I lost my contract, and I had worked hard for this place. And this was when my addiction was at its height, mind you. Everything just seemed to be spinning at that point. And so I lost my house, but I had been dating this guy for several months. And things were going great. It was really great at first. I was like, wow, finally. And so we move into this big, pretty house, and again, ignoring the red flags and only seeing what I wanted to see. And he was good at enabling my less than great decisions. And then kind of holding them against me. And this is my opinion at this current place in my life. That doesn't mean I won't feel different about that situation as I grow and heal. But yeah, he was good at stirring the pot there. And then that relationship turned abusive. And not that it wasn't anyway, it was just abusive in different ways than I had been accustomed to. Talk about under thumb. So he owned his own business and wanted me to come work for him. And so I worked at both places, the bar and there, and at another bar, because I had another part-time bar gig that I was working at on the weekends, and thought I was doing really well. I'm like, yeah, I'm finally doing it. I was still drinking, but I wasn't drugging. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm the shit, pardon my language, but that's where I was at this point in my life, okay? So, and you couldn't tell me any different. I was loud, I was rude, I was mean girl. Hi, what's a mean girl? I am not a mean girl. I guess if I have to be, I can be, but that's not who I want to be. Let me rephrase that. We all have things in us that we can choose to act on. And that's not who I choose to be, but I had become not a very nice person. And I'm sorry for that, for anybody that knew me during that time in my life, because it was not intentional to hurt anyone. It wasn't. And I apologize for anybody that was caught in the wreckage or the wake of my own wreckage. So dating this guy, moved in, started working for him at his place, and he wanted me to quit the strip club. And I did. And my manager even kind of gave me a talking to. She didn't want to see me get hurt again. She saw it. She knew what was coming. Oh, no, I'm fine. This is great. Yeah, yay. Look what we're doing now. And so I really liked working at that bar. And so I quit there and was full-time working with him. And so now I'm dating him, living with him, working for him. And I was great arm candy. And that's what that relationship came down to. And I think that's the only value he saw in me. Other than I was easily manipulatable. Boy, I can't believe that word came out. And so it was a nightmare working for him and living with him and dating him. He'd take me out drinking. I'd have to get up early. It got very controlling. Very controlling. And it got to the point where it was like, just sit down and smile. Sit still and look pretty. Anybody that knows me or has known me or has ever known me, quiet is not something I am. And at that point in my life, quiet really wasn't something I was. And I was suffocating. And I didn't want to do it. And we could have had a really nice life had I just sat down and smiled and looked pretty. And so I remember at the end of that relationship, how did it go? Like, I left. Let's see here. I was trying to remember. We had a fight, and I was, like, happy in the morning before going to work. I had to go open his business. And he basically sat me down and told me I was too happy. And there wasn't yelling. It was just a way of talking to me, right? And it was the beginning of the snapping point for me. And so I was upset as I was leaving for work. Thank goodness I didn't have the girls in the car with me at the time. And I left down the long driveway. And it wasn't icy or anything, but it was springtime, about this time of year, about 5 years ago. And I left, and I wasn't driving that fast, but he kind of lived back in the country. It was paved roads, and they were kind of in hills and kind of swirly. And I was crying, not hysterically, like I've known at that point in my life to be over the top and hysterical. I wasn't being hysterical. I was just kind of a calm cry, just broken. And I remember thinking to myself, the ground is wet. Make sure you're not going too fast. Make sure you don't hit the brakes too hard because you'll spin out. I wasn't drinking. I was sober. I wasn't hysterical. I wasn't any of the things that I had become at that point. And I wrecked my car. I'd not ever wrecked a car before. All the times of drunk driving, God forgive me. But I did it. I did it. All the times of gunning it and road raging and just all the bad things I had done, bad choices I had made. This wasn't that time. And I remember gently, stepping on the brake because I didn't want to spin out. And lo and behold, I spun out. And so then it was like I remember looking back over my shoulder to see where the ditch is. What am I about to hit? Am I going to roll? Driving classes, I remembered, you turn into the spin, or, I'm like trying to implement all the training that I had in my head all these years of this is what you do if you're ever in this situation. And I ended up in a ditch, backward, turned around, and had to get out. I got out of the ditch, thank goodness, had to get up and collect the parts off of my car, but I had to be at the store to open it. Had to be at the store on time to open it. Like, it wasn't an option. And so now my car is like really just hanging on by a thread. It's smoking. And I'm going, oh God, I gotta get to work. Please, God, let me get to work. And so I pick up the phone and I call the guy and I'm like, hey, I just want you to know I just totaled my car and I'm going to drive to work. But in case I don't make it on time, you should know. I'm going to hop in the shower and I'll follow you. Okay, great. And so I didn't want the car to blow up at his place. Regardless to how I felt about him, I still try not to hurt people. And so I parked in another business parking lot. I think it was like an empty one, but not next to, it was by itself. But a little further down in another parking lot was a church or something like that. So it was like this abandoned parking lot across a big street from him, all right? I literally just barely make it, and my car starts on fire. And so there's no saving this car at this point. I have no car now, which is even more mortifying. So I get in the store, I get everything all set up, and I'm just about done setting up and just about time to unlock the door. And I'm shaking. I'm like literally shaking. I'm crying, not hysterically, but it's been a hard morning. And here he comes through the front door, and he locks it because it wasn't time to open yet. And he goes, you better put on a smile before you unlock the door. That was it. Done. And so I'm just trying to keep it together at this point. And I want to say that at that point, I grabbed my purse and I went and sat in the car. My broken down car. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't continue the way I was going. Sure as hell didn't want to keep putting my children through this. Things needed to change now. And I wasn't drugging. And I remember that he came over a couple hours after that to the car, and he's like, get whatever you want to take out of the car with you, and I'm going to take you back to the house. Okay, whatever, fine. And went back to the house, and I changed clothes, and I was taking a nap when he got home. And he comes in, I wake up, and I don't remember what the first things was he said to me, but it was in a barky tone that I recall. And then he accused me of being on drugs at that point. And I'm like, are you freaking serious, dude? You're serious here? He walked out, and something snapped inside of me, and I said, I cannot continue this way. I refuse. I don't care how nice of a life it is. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care who you are. This is not how I want to live my life. And I couldn't do it anymore. I can still feel it in my body. And so I had on this little tiny sundress, no shoes, did not take my phone, did not take my purse. I started walking. And I kept walking. And I walked for about 2 miles. Pavement, rough gravel. The ground was hot. It was late afternoon. I walked until I got to the nearest gas station. I think it's like 2.5 miles. Feet were mangled at this point. I'm just praying every step of the way. Number one, he doesn't drive up behind me. Number two, what the hell am I going to do? Right? And so didn't take anything. I was just done, right? And so I get to the gas station, and a guy I knew, actually, from when I was married to the girls' dad, worked at that gas station. I didn't know that at that point. Maybe I did, but he just happened to be there. I think, if I'm remembering all this right. They let me use the phone. Like, somebody gave me a cigarette. I had no cigarettes. Because I smoke cigarettes. Working on that one. They let me use the phone And I believe I called his place of business to my other coworkers, and one of the wives was driving that way, and so she stopped and she picked me up and took me over there. They gave me some money for like a pack of cigarettes and some dinner and stuff, and I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't, but I had to get a hold of where my children were that day, and this was the person I had wrongfully trusted. And I was able to get a hold of, because you don't remember phone numbers these days, so I literally had to track people down at their work and stuff and leave messages and, hey, I need you to come get me so I can come be with the girls because I got to figure things out type thing. And because they would help me when I was working, And so I went out there to where the girls were with this couple, and this guy just wanted me out of the picture. He wanted to take my children from me. And so I don't remember how things started playing out at that point. And this is pretty close to the end of this chapter, as a matter of fact, because then we go into a whole new set of challenges and trials and tribulations. And so I don't remember. I want to say it was like a 5-year length of time between the time I left the girls' dad to the time I left that last boyfriend. And at that point, when I left him, I knew everything had to change. I wasn't going to lean on anyone. Not that I ever tried to lean on anyone. I always tried to do it all myself. But I wasn't going to have another person in my life telling me how it was going to be. Or live by their rules or under their roof or anything like that. I was going to find a way to change life for us and to be the woman I was supposed to be. I wanted to be. Maybe not supposed to be, but I wanted to be. And there was something coming ahead not long after this that I never would have saw coming and changed my life in ways I never would have dreamed of, that have brought me to the person I am today. And so without these trials and tribulations, without these bad choices and lack of boundaries and all of that stuff, all of my shadows, all of my darkness, I guess I couldn't know my own light if I wouldn't have seen my own darkness. And I never would have thought I held that darkness prior. I got to be honest with that. I only saw it in other people prior. I wasn't that person. No, I'm my own person. And I know now who I don't want to be. And so again, if you knew me during that period in my life, I apologize. Because, yeah, that's not who I am. And so I'd like to reintroduce myself. My name's Lisa. And I am so grateful for my recovery. I am so grateful for the life I live today. I am so grateful for God never leaving my side. And so with that was chapter 7 in the story of me. And there's a lot more details and stories, and I'm sure I'll think of a million different things I should have said or would have wanted to say as soon as I get done with this recording. But if you've stuck with me this long, I sure do appreciate you listening along. I hope that you've gleaned something from this chapter and from the other chapters. And just know you're not alone. If you're in an abusive relationship, there's more to life than that. You don't have to stay. You don't have to allow yourself to be hurt in that way. Reach out to me. Reach out to anyone. Don't suffer in silence. I suffered in silence for so many years due to so many fears, and that's why I'm sitting here telling my story now, because I refuse to be silent anymore. There were situations I was in where I was hurt by others. There were other situations where I was the one doing the hurting because I was operating from my wound. And all I can do is learn and grow from those times. And like I said, I know who I don't want to be anymore or ever again. Um, I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for the people that were patient with me. And I'm grateful for the people that took time for me and anybody that was there to help. I really am. And thank you for listening and following along with me. If you have any questions, want to reach out, I'm always here. Go ahead and leave me a comment. Reach out to me on any of the platforms. You should find me there. And I hope you have a really good afternoon. And I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye for now.